Hello, in this lesson we're going to look at limited companies. So it's all under types of ownership. But the first thing we're going to do is have a wee starter. So working on your Nat 5 knowledge and maybe just general knowledge. What is a shareholder? What is a dividend? What is a stock exchange? And what is the role of the Bank of England? So that's something for you to work on and find out. Learning intentions for today, we are learning to understand limited companies. Success criteria, I can describe the features of a private limited company. I can describe advantages and disadvantages of being a private limited company. I can describe the features of a PLC, which is a public limited company, and I can describe advantages and disadvantages of being a PLC, a public limited company. So types of ownership, quite a big topic, but it shouldn't really be dwelled on, and because the questions are usually to talk about or compare in terms of ownership, control, and finance, and know a wee bit about advantages and disadvantages. But we'll come to that. So here's a recap between the private sector, public sector, and third sector. So in the private sector, we have sole traders, partnerships, a private limited company, an LTD. This is what we're going to learn in the higher. We've got public limited companies, but it's important to remember it's a misnomer. Public limited company actually is still the private sector. It's like the way that oddly in Britain people talk about private schools, but they call them public schools, right? So remember, a public limited company, a PLC, is in the private sector. We've also got franchises, which we won't go into today, and multinationals. In the public sector, we've got government organisations like the NHS, public corporations like the BBC, and local government like your local council, like East Renfrewshire Council or South Lanarkshire Council. Third sector, we have charities, social enterprises like the Big Issue, and not-for-profit organisations such as your local golf club or tennis club. So obviously I would give this out to pupils, give them a grid they've got to go and complete about sole traders and partnerships. There's an QI for you. What is Google Project Glass? It's basically Google's idea of a kind of visual aid that can do all the things a smartphone can do. It can take calls, take pictures, it can give you directions, all sorts. There's a cracking video that gives you an intro to Google Project Glass, but it's never really came about to the mainstream. It's never took on. Maybe one day it will, and perhaps they might actually end up using it as contact lenses because the glasses do look a bit absurd. So here we go. Private limited companies, LTDs, they're owned by individuals between at least over two shareholders, and remember, a shareholder is an owner of a business. You still have to have memorandum and articles of association. Remember that from partnerships. And owners, it's owned by shareholders. Usually in LTD, it's family, and their main function is to elect a board of directors. The money is raised by share issue or borrowing, or from own funds from their own equity. You have ordinary shares and preference shares. Ordinary shares means you get a vote at the AGM, the annual general meeting. Preference shares means you don't get a vote, but if there's a profit, you get paid first. And the profit is obviously shared between shareholders, or it's retained by the company. And the payout they give to shareholders is called a dividend. So here's some advantages. You can actually have more equity than partnerships. You can raise more money. You've got limited liability. That's one of the main things. Which, remember, limited liability means that you only lose the stake you put in. So if I put in, say, £500 into a business and the business goes bust, I'll only lose that £500. The owner still can retain control of the company. If the owner dies, the company can still go ahead. That's why we've still got, like, sadly, Arnold Clark Ltd is still going. Arnold Clark sadly died, but Arnold Clark was a private limited company, family run. and you ran it for a long time, live to quite an old age. But when Alan Clark sadly died, the company didn't just dissolve, it keeps going. It doesn't have to publish all of its accounts. There's some it needs to do, but we'll just think of it as that. Negatives, you've got to register with Company House. Sometimes harder because a bigger company to motivate and control workers. You've got more setup costs, legal and administrative costs, and you do have diseconomies of scale sometimes because you're getting bigger, but there's problems with getting big. Aldi and Lidl. Aldi and Lidl refuse to become PLCs because they want to keep their finances private so competitors can't find out all the information on them. So the example, Alan Clark Ltd, just what I said, ownership, family owned, control, it's run by the family, and finance, things like retained profit, means the profit they've saved from the previous years, owner capital or owner equity, the money they invest in the business, and bank loans. Remember, for types of ownership questions, you'll probably have to talk about ownership, control, and finance. Here's a little thing about shares, but Netflix, so you can see when Netflix started streaming, the share price was quite low, but gradually it starts to pick up because of information. For example, now it's streaming on Apple platforms in 2010, so it starts to rise. 6 EU countries in 2014, so it starts to rise again. Worldwide in 2017, and then from that, Netflix's shares have shot up, and you can just see at the very end it started to dip because of competitors such as, pardon me, Amazon and Disney Plus. However, at the moment we're in the lockdown, so it'd be interesting to see Netflix's shares right now. I'm sure that they'll start to take off because more people are staying in and streaming. The reason I mention that is because shares are very important when we talk about public limited companies. I'll explain why in a minute. So here we come to the misnomer of public limited companies. Remember, public limited company, which can be shortened to PLC, is in the private sector. In America, they don't call them PLCs, they call them Inc. INC Incorporated, which means Monsters Inc. And in fact, the second bullet point shows you that there. You're given a certificate of incorporation approved by Company House, the registrar of companies. So in America, you'd be called Monsters Inc. In the UK, you'd be called Monsters PLC. Shareholders, same idea. You can have 2 or more shareholders. You sell the shares on the stock exchange. This is a main difference from private limited companies. If I want to buy shares in a private limited company, I have to get the owners, the shareholders, to agree with me to sell those shares. If they don't agree, I can't buy them. However, once you're listed on the stock exchange, they trade daily, and all you need to do is pick up the phone or go on the internet and you can buy shares and nobody can stop you, right? So that helps them raise a lot of equity, which is capital, by share issue or borrowing. And also they prepare a thing called a prospectus. You guys will know it from prospectuses from their university, which just shows you, it tells you all about why you should actually buy into the company, why you should buy shares. Again, profits shared between shareholders or retained by the company, just what I said, and also paying out dividends. The board of directors is slightly different. Usually they appoint a board of directors that are not to do with the family. So it's the first time it's called the divorce of ownership and control. So Arnold Clark, Baxter's, all the little family LTDs, when they become public, they really open themselves up to more scrutiny and obviously the threat of takeover. Somebody else can come in, or they have to appoint a chief executive officer or managing director. So we can see here the pluses and minuses. Again, you can have more equity than private limited companies. Share issues can raise millions of pounds. They can employ specialists, so you'll have a marketing department, finance, HR, operations, and even within those departments, rather than you having to give your accounts to a third party or to outsource your accounts, you can have your own financial team who'll do that for you. Good thing is, again, you still get limited liability. This company still keeps going even if the owner dies, and the shares can be issued through the stock exchange, which is good and bad, right? We'll explain that in a minute. So negatives: very expensive to form, higher legal and administrative costs even from LTDs. You must publish accounts. So a lot of football teams are PLCs. You can go on the internet and find out how Man United got on, how their accounts are doing. Remember, you won't get the most up to date because it takes them a year to publish them. So don't worry if you're trying. If it's 2020, if you're trying to find out the results, it might only be up to 2018. Also, again, same kind of thing as an LTD. The bigger the company becomes, it can become unwieldy and hard to manage. It can become hard for decision making. There's a lot of people involved, and decision making can be slower, and there's a lot of complex issues and information involved. Again, you'll have diseconomies of scale. You'll also have economies of scale, which means the benefits of being big, but there are also some diseconomies of scale, and importantly, you are at threat of a potential hostile takeover because you're on the stock market. If, for example, a billionaire Arab sheikh comes in, likes to look at your PLC, you can phone up the stock exchange and say, okay, I'll buy every share going and I'll take control of that company. Or if he's using his brains, he'll probably buy 51% so he gets a controlling stake. And that's basically what happened to Manchester City. So here's an example: ownership, Tesco PLC. Ownership owned by shareholders. Remember, a shareholder is a part owner in a business. When you buy shares in a business, you will get a certificate to say you are a shareholder, and it'll tell you how many shares you've got. But remember, the price, the value of the shares will go up and down, just like that Netflix image I showed you, the graph, where depending on the news, and that's why you should always watch the news, depending on the news and what's happening in the world and sales and etc., shares will go up and down, right? The markets react to the world. That's why at the moment you can see with coronavirus, oil and gas is at absolute historic rock bottoms. But you would imagine that once we all start, eventually once lockdown eases and people start going about their business again, people start driving their cars, planes will need fuel, etc., oil and gas will start to creep up again. Control, it's run by a chief executive officer, or sometimes called managing director, and a board of directors that are appointed at an annual general meeting held once a year, where they get to go over the results, the financial results of the company, and they can then decide whether to, you know, keep the same team in charge or vote them out. You quite often see that if a company gets poor results, the CEO steps down, or is takes early retirement or putting garden leave. It's a kind of, they're shifted out of the place. But usually it happens when there's bad results. Not always, but most times. And then obviously finance, the main thing is share issue, buy and sell on the stock exchange. They can raise millions, and bank loans again, and retain profits. So again, this is something for my pupils. I would give them a task, a grid, where they've got to complete all the information that we've learned there about, ownership, control, finance, and advantages, disadvantages, and some key terms that they would have to learn. So here's a little quote from Lou Holtz, an American football coach. The answer to 3 questions will determine your success or failure. Can people trust me to do my best? Am I committed to do the task in hand? Do I care about other people? In short, if the answer to all 3 questions are yes, there's no way you can fail. Good way to live your life. So, going back to the previous lesson, vision tip, sectors of industry versus sectors of the economy. Remember, primary is getting an I at the start, so that's primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary, sectors of industry. And the right hand side, private is getting an E at the end, private, public, and third, the sectors of economy. And here is the summary for that. Private, public, and third. Private sector owned by shareholders, run by board directors. It's got limited liability, that's good for investors. Financed mainly by shares, not only shares but mainly. Sole traders, partnerships, and franchises. Private limited companies and public limited companies are examples of private sector. Public sector owned by government, run by government appointed managers such as the Director General of the BBC, financed by our taxes. For example, national insurance pays for the NHS, licence fee pays for the BBC, that's where it's financed, and the BBC and NHS are examples of public corporations. Third sector, also known as the voluntary sector, they're not owned by anyone really, but they're trustees. Remember, people who are entrusted to look after the business, they're liable for any decisions that go wrong. They run it as well, financed mainly through things like donations, charity shops, and gifts. And a little example is Great Ormond Street Hospital. Alan Sugar is actually a trustee. He is one of the people on the board who makes sure that nobody's running the charity badly or try to steal the money and abscond with the money, I should say, which has happened in the past in certain charities. So they're trusted to look after the charity. And here's a little thing about exam questions. So here's one here. Compare a private limited company, an LTD, with a public limited company, a PLC, 4 marks, and explain the advantages and disadvantages of becoming a public limited company, 4 marks. So let's look at it. Remember, command words are important. So compare a private limited company with a public limited company, PLC. Compare is a command word where you're allowed to have similarities and differences. I try to encourage my pupils to say when you're doing a similarity, you use the word both, and when you're trying to look at a difference, you use a connecting word whereas. I'll explain. Both PLCs and LTDs have shareholders, aka part owners of a business. They both have limited liability. They both are treated as a separate legal entity, meaning that when the owner dies, the company can still trade. Here we go, there's some differences now. A PLC trades its shares on the stock exchange, whereas an LTD doesn't and can only sell shares if the shareholder agrees. Now, remember, that whole thing there is just 1 mark. So if you just wrote a PLC trades its shares on the stock exchange, you wouldn't get the mark. You've got to compare. A PLC must publish its full accounts, whereas an LTD can keep most but not all of its financial information private. Moving on to explain. Explain is the hardest command word probably at higher. It really forms 2 parts. You have to have the identification part and then a development mark. One of the best ways is actually to use a connecting word to say like this means. So you'll see what I mean. Explain the advantages and disadvantages of becoming a public limited company, a PLC. So here we go. Limited liability, which means, or it could be, this means shareholders are only liable for the money they invested. Now, the bit in red, limited liability, would be the ID field, and then the second part after, which means it would be a development mark. Those 2 bits come together to act development point. Those 2 bits together make 1 mark. Right, so if you just put down limited liability, you'd get 0. If you just put down the second part, which says shareholders are only liable for money invested, no, you need to say what does that mean? Where does that come from? It's limited liability. So more examples. Company does not die if owners die, which means the firm will continue to make a profit after the owners are gone. Shares can be issued through stock exchange, which means that there's a large amount of equity that can be raised to from general members of the public. Formation is expensive, which means the dividends may take time to be paid out. So hopefully you can see there basically that explain does involve a bit of thinking, and you've really got to hammer down the technique you've got for answering. I'll do a video on command words at some point, because command words really do, every year there's a report from the principal assessor, and command words are the biggest difference between pupils achieving A's and B's or even passing fails. If you want to improve, you need to learn the content, but you have to be able to understand and apply command words. And here's the last wee one here. Must publish accounts, which means competitors may see sensitive information. So remember, that's why Aldi and Lidl want to just remain private limited companies, LTDs. They don't want Tesco and Asda to find out what they're doing. Bizarrely enough, they can see what Tesco are doing, because Tesco is a PLC, whereas Aldi and Lidl are LTDs. Little QI, nearly finished. Who is the world's largest toy distributor? It is actually, drumroll, it is McDonald's via the Happy Meal. Quite amazing, isn't it? But it's actually true. So there's a plenary triangle or plenary pyramid for you. So what I want you to do is, in the top part of the pyramid, write down 1 question you have, put in the middle 2 things you enjoyed or found useful, and finally 3 facts that you have learned today in this lesson. And again, a good review to go back and think about how this ties in with the success criteria. Can you answer those questions? Okay, thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next video.